Welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Entertainment Podcast. My name is Sarah. I have a great show for you today. I am happy, as always, to be bringing you another author interview. Today I am interviewing BettyJoyce Nash about her coming-of-age novel, Everybody Here Is Kin, and we'll get to that soon. But before we start, I would like to ask you to like and follow the show. That really does help us to get this show out to more listeners and more readers, such as yourselves. Okay, so here's where we have another example of the work in progress. You're going to see that it's dark behind me, right? It wasn't dark half a second ago. I had to come in and re-record 2 segments of this introduction here and later when I talk about when I give you the description of the book, and that is because I messed up in what I did and it didn't record the audio, so you just had the video. So again, thank you so much for bearing with me, and thank you for being here with me. If you have been listening to the podcast for years, I appreciate that. Maybe you've just discovered us on YouTube and you're new. Thank you. Thanks for hanging in there with me. The audio podcast has almost 500 episodes, which is amazing. But you will see right here, nope, that way. You will see right here next to me this screen that is saying, become a part of the podcast, be part of the show. If you would like to help support this podcast, you can do so by going to gsmc.info, and you can tip and donate to the show. It is amazingly helpful to get the podcast out to more listeners, more book lovers like yourselves, and it is greatly appreciated. You'll see that there is a different link right here. It's a very long link, and if you want to use that one, it works as well. But the one that's scrolling along the bottom, and see, I can't point, but down there at the bottom it says to help the show, and it's scrolling along in that blue box. That says the correct link, gsmc.info. And again, it really helps if you choose to do it. I thank you in advance, but thank you for every support you give. Just listening, liking, commenting, etc. helps the podcast, so thank you so much. I hope you're having a great day. You can see behind me that it is a little gloomy out there. That's not rain. We're not getting rain today. Here's something interesting about where I live in Portugal. This happened not too long after we moved here 2 years ago, and we were very confused. The sky looked very ominous. It was this crazy yellow color. I kept calling it apocalypse sky. It was the weirdest color. And we asked our neighbor, and they said, yeah, this time of year we tend to get dust storms. And today is one of those dust storms. Everything is covered in dust. It's not actually dust. It's sand from the Sahara Desert. How weird is that? No. Nowhere that I lived prior to moving to Portugal would I have ever gotten sand from the Sahara Desert coating anything. It's just, it's fascinating to me. I think it's really cool. I mean, I've not yet been to the African continent, but the African continent has come to me here in Portugal. So that's why it's a little gloomier outside. It's not, wasn't sunny today. Everything was covered by, not rain clouds, but dust clouds. So that is interesting. I hope that you are having a good Friday and that maybe you're having some interesting weather as well. I hope that it's starting to be spring wherever you are. That's always my hope for you. It was, even with the dust, it was a gorgeous 70 degrees today. We took the dogs for our usual walk and enjoyed that. Met a very interesting gentleman visiting, well, actually, he's German, but he said he's lived in Austin, Texas for the last 40 years. So he is, he's just as much from Texas, he said, as he is from Germany, but he is here visiting on his way to Spain. That's what I love about our walks. We meet so many different people from so many different parts of the world, and it is, I would probably not ever talk to half of them, but my husband is a lovely extrovert, and he talks to people all the time, so that is fun. And then I get the benefit of meeting new people because my husband is an extrovert. And our dogs also are extroverts. They will go and just randomly headbutt people to see if they want to give them scritches. And a lot of the times the people do want to give them scritches. You know what? My dogs notwithstanding, let's talk about some books. Okay, again, the book is called Everybody Here Is Kin. The author is BettyJoyce Nash. It is once again dark behind me. Let me go ahead and give you the description of the book. On Boneyard Island, Georgia, where everyone's weirdly kin, 13-year-old Lucille is marooned when her mother goes AWOL with an old flame, leaving Lucille with only her father's ashes, two half-siblings, and Will, the misanthropic manager of the island's only motel. The abandonment kills hope of Lucille's promised snorkeling trip to the Florida Reef before ocean heat kills the coral and illusions she's harbored about her mother's sanity. Everybody Here is Kin explores the lives of this sinking family, the island community, and fears of exposing wounds, old and new, when natural disaster forces them to trust and depend on strangers. And again, that is Everybody Here is Kin. The author is BettyJoyce Nash. I really love the way BettyJoyce developed the characters in this book. It is a coming-of-age story, not only for Lucille, who is 13, about to be 14, but also Will, who is 30, but he's dealing with PTSD. He is isolating himself, and all of this begins to change for both Will and Lucille when they find themselves together. Lucille being left by her mother, who has gone off with a former high school boyfriend. She has left her 3 children for several days, gone to another island, and Will is working at this motel, living at this motel. He meets these 3 children. He and Lucille strike up a relationship. Actually, he strikes up a relationship with all 3 of the children, and it's just really fun to see their relationship grow and expand and their character arcs grow through this relationship. There's also some really great secondary characters. I don't want to tell you too much because I want you to read the book. BettyJoyce would like you to read the book, but there's some great secondary characters. We will talk a little bit more about Maisie, Lucille's younger sister, later in the podcast, but there's some secondary characters that we don't talk about, but that are very, very important to the plot, to especially Lucille's development throughout the story. So I really like the way that BettyJoyce crafted the characters, developed the characters. Really, you can tell she got to know these characters as she was writing them. So again, let's let BettyJoyce talk to you about the story, about writing the story, about everything that went into bringing this book to life. The book is called Everybody Here is Kin. The author is BettyJoyce Nash. Let's go now to that interview. Hello, BettyJoyce. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, it is great to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. I'm happy to have you and to talk about your book, Everybody Here is Kin. Before we get to the book, though, could you take a few minutes just to introduce yourself a little bit so my listeners can get to know you?
Sure. Yeah, I'm BettyJoyce Nash, and I haven't always been a writer. I was a visual artist before. I was a potter, and I made my living that way for 10 years and lived in Chicago. And at some point, I started wondering if my muscles were going to hold up over all that time, over a lifetime. So I switched to writing. I went to journalism school and got a master's and started reporting. And then I became curious and wanted to go a little deeper. And I started writing fiction, which sometimes I think, what was I thinking? But I did. I managed to publish a few stories, and I earned an MFA in fiction. And then just, again, another crazy whim, started on a novel.
So what I'm hearing from that is that you definitely like to learn, because you've taken a couple of different paths and you've gone to school and gotten degrees and learned a lot of new things.
Right.
That's wonderful.
And I think that's the great thing about novel writing too, is you're just forced into learning about people and learning about whatever you choose that for their professions to be, whatever they're doing day to day. I mean, you're forced to figure out who they are and what they're doing. And it involves a lot of learning, which is what I think. And I'm glad you asked about research, because that's one of my favorite pieces of writing.
I love hearing about research. It's fascinating, the things that people learn when they're writing novels. But in terms of the novel, it is called, again, Everybody Here is Kin. Can you give an overview of the story?
Sure. It sounds kind of crazy, but it's a coming of age story for both the characters. There's a 13-year-old girl and a 30-year-old man, an Iraq War veteran, and both are hurting. Each are hurting in a different way. And I like throwing unlikely characters together. People who wouldn't ordinarily be thrown together are suddenly thrown together. And in this case, when Lucille's mother kind of goes AWOL with a a potential new flame while they're on vacation on this island in Georgia. She is forced to take over the care of her two siblings, Jack, who's 5 years old, and Maisie, who's 7 years old. And so she's forced to deal with it and can't really get in touch with her mother because her mother is also on a different island. And so the only person there is Will, who's hiding out from the world, managing a motel with, a few guests here and there, but it's kind of a lonely place. And yeah, the characters in a way, you know, mirror the setting because they're out there. They're both loners at this point, and although Lucille has a lot of responsibility, she feels a little bit lost.
Yeah, absolutely. They're both very lonely, somewhat broken individuals, and they find each other in this kind of strange confluence of events.
Right.
So, what was your initial inspiration for the story?
Well, I spent a lot of time. I lived on a barrier island for about 5 years off the coast of South Carolina. This particular island doesn't really mirror that island because it was fairly close to Charleston, and this island is a little more remote. And I loosely modeled Boneyard after Sapelo Island, which is off the coast of Georgia, and you have to get to that by ferry. And there are also native shell rings on that island, and and it's there is a nice beach there, but it's fairly remote. So part of it is the setting really came first, and I'm glad you asked that question. Like because I did live on this barrier island, and I just thought, what an interesting place to set a book. So I did, and then just somehow found these two characters to populate it, along with a few other characters.
That is a bit of an introduction to not only Betty Joyce, but also everybody here is kin, and we are going to take our first break of this episode. The entire time I was talking to Betty Joyce, I kept noticing her earrings, and I thought they were really lovely. And then as the segment was playing, I was noticing my earrings, and maybe you did as well. I will just make mention of the fact that we recorded this on Sunday, which was in fact St. Patrick's Day. So yes, I am wearing green shamrock earrings in the recorded parts of the episode from the interview. Random. Anyway, we were talking a little bit about characters, and as I said at the beginning of this, there are some characters, some secondary characters that I really, really enjoyed in this book. And it's always tricky with things like this. You don't want to give too much away because I want people to read the books, and Betty Joyce, of course, would love for you to read the book. But there were some really lovely secondary characters who added so much depth and different entry points into the story, different angles of the story, and a couple of those secondary characters become really important in the plot, especially as it moves on and during the storm, the scenes with the storm. So just secondary characters can be extremely important as well. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Maisie later on in the interview. That's Lucille's younger sister. But we are going to take that first break of the episode. When we come back, we will be talking about Lucille as the main character, as opposed to those secondary characters. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Mm-hmm. 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 Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, But what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with author BettyJoyce Nash. We are talking about her coming-of-age novel, Everybody Here Is Kin. Before the break, we were talking about place and characters and how the setting really influenced the development of the story, the development of the characters, etc. One more time where it's dark behind me, but just a reminder that if you are a fan of this podcast, if you would like to help support this podcast in all of its work in progress glory, you can do so by going to gsmc.info. You can leave a tip and a donation. You can leave me a comment as well, but gsmc.info. You can also use the link that is playing in the video right now. It's much longer, but if that's the link you wish to use, it works as well. But again, I thank you in advance if you want to help support this podcast to get it out to more listeners and book lovers such as yourselves. Just go to gsmc.info. Thanks. We are now going to move on to Lucille as that main character and what about her you might like as you're reading this book. So let's return to the interview with author BettyJoyce Nash. Let's talk a little bit more about Lucille and Will. Again, they're very different. They have a lot in common, but they're very different. 13-year-old, almost 14, young woman, 30-year-old man. It seems like an unlikely friendship, but here they are thrown together, kind of helping each other out. What about each of them do you think will resonate with readers?
Well, Lucille is because she's always had to take responsibility for her brother and sister because her mother is a very hardworking woman, like a lot of single mothers. And her father died in the Iraq War when she was maybe, I believe, 5. And I think her vulnerability will, really wake readers up. But at the same time, she's quite capable, overly so, really. I mean, she has people fooled. And I think that any women especially will identify with Lucille and even identify with her mother. You know, we all know single mothers who have to work the live long day just to kind of keep things together and keep the family together, the children, especially with 3 children. And then Will, he's a taciturn guy. He's not going out of his way to make friends because he's broken also from the war, but he's perfectly capable of taking care of himself, except really emotionally. And neither of them really realize, what they need. And he is a do-right kind of guy. He is, once he sees these children have been literally abandoned, even if it's just for a few days, because the mother has left them a note saying that she'll be back in a couple of days. But he was in the army, and the army is no one left behind. So he's going to look out for them, even though, Lucille doesn't really want him to.
And it's an interesting dynamic because Lucille really has been parentified in her situation. She's forced into that
That's a good word for it. Yeah.
She's forced into this much too mature role for her age. Will is, well, he has a cat, but he's really not, he's not taking responsibility for much at this point in his life. And then they come together and they almost start parenting each other in some ways, which is interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
What the book is written from Lucille's point of view in first person and from Will's point of view in third person. Can you talk about writing from 2 points of view and also writing from the first and the third? Were there challenges in that?
There were, and I'm glad you asked that question because really, when you think about it, the point of view from is probably the most important decision an author makes. And believe me, I tried everything. I tried writing everybody in first person. I tried even some of the more minor characters. I would have a chapter from their point of view. And sometimes I didn't use the I pronoun. I used the third, which would be he or she. And but it just didn't work. There were too many perspectives, and even I got confused, and I was the author, so I thought, well, the reader's going to be really confused. So I opted for the 2 points of view, and at first, both of those, Will and Lucille, because they're the real players in the book, at first that got confusing, right? If I'm writing Lucille from I and I'm writing Will from I. So then at the suggestion actually of someone, another author who read the book, she said, why don't you just put Will in third person? And and so I did that, and I liked it because, uh, Lucille is kind of really out there, and she is not really hiding from people in the way that Will is. And so I thought it was really perfect to have Will in a slightly more distant point of view, even though I'm privy to his thoughts and feelings. Uh, he never let me get that close in the third person. So I ended up liking it, and it may have along the way, I don't know, confused somebody or maybe kept some people from accepting the book, when I was trying to shop it around. But to me, it really works.
Yeah, I agree. And I was thinking the same thing about the third person distancing Will a little bit more. It makes sense that he's the one that's written in third person. A lot of sense. You talked a little bit about the setting, which in some ways becomes a bit of a character in itself. Can you talk about the importance of the setting on the characters and their character arcs?
Yes, yes. I feel like the setting really came first for me as a writer. Every writer is different, and not only was it a little bit familiar, but I was fascinated by the profile of the Barrier Island ecology. You have the ocean, and then the wide swath of beach, and then behind that some sand dunes, and then behind that the twisting marshes and tidal creeks. And then if you're lucky, if they haven't already, you know, felled the forest with bulldozers, there's typically a maritime forest. And it's just there's a lot of opportunity there for exploration. And I knew Lucille would love it because she is a global warming, really frightened of global warming. And so the setting really, I feel like, mimics their vulnerability because their situations are urgent, even though they may not recognize that. And the islands, these barrier islands, there's urgency about climate change, and we've lost so many already that it felt like it added more tension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to your characters, then in setting came first here and your characters came later, but when you start getting an idea for a character, do you sit down and really sketch out the character themselves, or do you prefer to have them develop as you write, or is it a combination thereof?
Yeah, I do a little bit of sketching out, like things like, well, what do they look like, and what do they like, and that kind of thing. And a lot of times they're composites of either people I know or people I've met, but really to get to the bottom of a character, I have to place that character in a scene because I don't really know what they're going to do until I have them in a place, a specific setting, on a specific day, trying to do a specific thing, accomplish a goal, or learn something, or interact with somebody, and then I can once I see what they're going to do, what's going to make them mad, what's going to make them sad, then I get to know them. But I can't just make up somebody and write a whole novel about them. And I would say that I'm sure, I mean, the novel was roughly 300 pages. I am sure that I threw away many, many more than 300 pages along the way.
Sure. Makes sense. Will is an artist in addition to everything else. His outlet is art. I would imagine that you probably relied on a little bit of your own experience, even though it's different mediums. But what was that like to write Will as an artist, but in a different medium than what you're used to working with?
That was a lot of fun. I actually took some wood carving classes, kind of in preparation. Again, it's the research thing. As to me, the novel, is an opportunity to explore. So that was a lot of fun to actually try to carve the wood, and I know some wood carvers, so I could, try to talk to them about the kinds of things he might be making. But it made sense that he would be an artist, even though I don't think he would like to. I think he has some issues with being called an artist, but yeah, it just seemed like a natural fit.
Yeah, my dad's a wood carver, so it was fun to.
Really? Oh,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah, so it was fun.
That's hard.
Yeah, I've never tried it, but it was always fun to watch my dad, and always wonderful to get those gifts every year. When he would make birthday, Christmas, etc. So loved that. As you can see from the break in the interview, it is time for our second break of this episode. I do love that Will's character is a wood carver because, of course, if you've been listening to the audio podcast for a long time, then you know that I'll take any excuse to brag on my dad. And he was a carver as well. He did a lot of woodwork, from building furniture in the past to then more recently he did a lot of different wood carving projects, and seriously, they have such a special place for me that just anything that makes me think of my dad, makes me smile, is a good thing in my book. So we are going to take that break for this interview. When we come back, we'll be talking about research. Betty Joyce has mentioned research a couple of times already. So we are going to be talking about research, what types of research she did for Everybody Here Is Kin. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Entertainment Network. As you know, I am speaking today with author BettyJoyce Nash about her novel, Everybody Here Is Kin. I keep trying to say that incorrectly. Everybody Here Is Kin. I do know the name of the book. And before the break, we were talking about Will and wood carving, and mentioned my dad. So let's go ahead now and get back to that interview with Betty Joyce. So research, you've mentioned it a couple of times, and that how fun you think it is. So what research for this novel stood out to you or was particularly fun?
Well, there are a number of things that I did research. I read books on sea turtles. There's a book by Carol Ruckteschell and Robert Shoup, and it's kind of the sea turtle book. And I read that and really delighted in learning all about the sea turtles who, miraculously come back to the same beaches to lay their eggs. And that just seemed to fit almost too well with the plot. I thought people are going to think I made that up, but it's really true.
Yeah.
And then the other thing were the native shell rings that are on Sapelo Island. I think there are 3 there. I'm not sure, but I called an archaeologist at the University of Georgia, and he not only was willing to talk to me for a while, but he actually, I don't know what to call it, not manages, but he studies those particular shell rings. And so that was just a stroke of luck. But I enjoy learning so much. And it also like sometimes if you're stuck, if you're a writer and you're stuck, research really gives you an opportunity to deepen the sort of roots of the novel and also, widen them. You can gives you many more opportunities to choose from settings and all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. This is back a question, but we were talking about art, and the cover art for the novel is beautiful. Did you have a hand in that, or was that someone else?
The publisher, I believe she told me that the artist was a fairly recent graduate from the Savannah College of Art and Design, which I think she did a beautiful job because it's very dreamlike. I think I had envisioned more of a cover. A lot of novels are covers where they do really fun, funky things with text and real colorful. And when I saw it, I thought, well, I kind of liked it because it really seemed to show somebody who is just judging a book by its cover, what the certainly it indicates setting, it indicates there's an isolated figure in the background. And I thought it was really perfect.
Yeah, it's really pretty. I liked it. This is a little bit random, so bear with me, but I'm curious. Maisie is 7. She is obsessed with The Wire, the TV show The Wire.
Yeah.
She quotes it all the time. As a family that I come from a family that communicates via movie quotes. We do that a lot, but
oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
Like my brother and I can have whole text conversations of nothing but movie quotes, but where did that come from? That it's such a quirky element of Maisie's character. Where did it come from?
Yeah, well, that I am not really sure. And again, there's so much about writing a book like this that you're literally living it every day. And it took me a long time to write this book, even when I wasn't actively writing, it was in my mind. And so I can't really say exactly where it came from, but I know that I was anxious to give as much as I could, give each child their own identity. And so I needed something for the middle child because the middle child
often gets overlooked.
Yeah, that's right. And so I don't know. I just kept asking myself, well, what would she like to watch on TV? What would she do? And then alternatively, what's the most unlikely thing that she could do? And I think though maybe The Wire was really popular at the time, or reruns of The Wire, because I know it's an old show. But I don't know. I just thought of that, and especially once I started, because I think there is that sort of underground of people who watch The Wire, and they probably know all those lines by heart, and so it wasn't hard to find them.
I love it. I just had to ask because it was so quirky.
Yeah.
There are underlying messages here. Obviously, it's a coming of age story. There's a lot of different things going on. Lucille is very concerned with the environment, and she has a lot of anxiety about it. But is there any larger picture that you hope readers might take away from the book?
Well, really, just the most obvious one, that we really are all related, and we're related to our world as well. And it's just a mistake to think that you can go off and live by yourself and only take care of yourself without thinking of your effect on other human beings, and without, needing other human beings. I mean, I think it's just a humanity thing, that we need to take better care of our world and each other.
Yeah. Yep. I like that. That's beautiful. Are you working on anything currently? Anything new?
Well, I have written a novella loosely based on my own experience, about a woman kind of coming of age. And by the way, coming of age is an interesting concept because I feel like all of us are coming of age all the time, really, all human beings.
Different stages, right? Yeah.
Right. And so I moved to the upper Midwest from the South when I was quite young. And I really struggled up there, with the climate and everything else. And I was trying to become a potter. So I wrote, it's a fictionalized memoir. Not everything in it is true, but I had a lot of fun writing that, and kind of using my own experience as the basis.
Yeah, nice. Does that have a release date, or is it still in that initial process?
Yeah, I'm trying to find a publisher now for it. It's a
Okay.
novella. It's not quite novel length, so there aren't as many publishers for novellas as there are for novels. But who knows? Maybe I'll just have to flesh it out and make it longer.
Yeah, you never know what will come of it.
Right.
You you were a potter, then you were a journalist, but what was the final push that you said, I'm going to write and I'm going to try to write for publication?
Well, I was used to getting published easily as a journalist. I had a job as a reporter. I was in the newspaper every single day. And then I moved around a lot and had different jobs. And my last job was as an economics writer. Those stories took longer to produce, and it was for a quarterly magazine. But at one time, at some point, I felt like I wanted to get deeper into character. And because, when you're writing nonfiction, um, if you're writing creative nonfiction, there's plenty of opportunity to get into character. But with what I was writing, journalism style, there wasn't as much opportunity. And you know, I just wanted to go deeper into human nature, I guess. And it really feels like that when you're writing a novel. You feel like you're really exploring what drives us human beings to act the way we do
Yeah, there's a lot of
in
fascinating.
different circumstances. Yeah, in
Yeah,
different
yeah.
circumstances, because everybody struggles with something. I mean, yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's time for our final break of this episode, as you can tell by me being in a different outfit again. But that line that BettyJoyce just said, everybody struggles with something, definitely resonates with me lately. It's true. Everybody does struggle with something. And I think sometimes we read books because, we either want to not think about our own struggles so much, or maybe we want to read about something else, someone else's struggle. Sometimes for me, it's comforting to read about someone else's struggle and know that in 200 pages, 300 pages, however long, that struggle is probably going to be resolved. Of course, not every book is like that, but I do tend to, for escapism, like to read the books that I know are going to have some kind of happily ever after, whether that's romantically or not, but the struggle will be resolved, and it's important in books to have that character arc that's usually based on struggle. But we are going to take our final break of this episode. When we come back, BettyJoyce will be giving the advice that she has for aspiring authors. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author BettyJoyce Nash. Before the break, we were talking about struggles and writing various types of struggles, or sometimes just writing, putting people together in a room to make lunch and seeing where that takes you. We are going to go ahead now and finish off this interview with BettyJoyce. From your own experience, what advice would you give to someone who's thinking they also might want to write?
Well, the only thing to do is to just write, just get started and just, you know, I mean, I can't tell you the number of scenes. I mean, I must have written thousands and thousands of scenes that will never make it into the novel, but just getting to know a character, just write scenes, just put two people or three people in a room. And even if they're just making lunch, there's a lot of opportunity there. And, nothing, we're not that interested in people who aren't in trouble, but they don't, all of us are in trouble at one time or another, or maybe even multiple times a day, depending on what trouble means for you. And so there are subtle ways of being in trouble, and there are, explosive ways of being in trouble. So depending on what kind of writer you are, and if you're an action adventure type, you can find plenty of scenarios because things do happen, lots of bad things do happen and good things happen. And sometimes the good things are just as problematic and can be just as traumatic depending on your take on life as the other things.
You said put them in a room and have them make lunch. It just made me think of the scene where Will is frying fish, and that is the most chaotic meal prep, I think.
Right. In the small kitchen.
Yes.
In fact, his whole house is based on this downstairs apartment that I rented when I was in my early 20s living on this barrier island. And I was picturing it the whole time I wrote it, this tiny little stove and this big pan full of grease, hot grease.
Yeah. And then grease fire. Yeah. There was a lot.
Right.
When you take the time to read for yourself, just for your own pleasure, who are your favorite authors and your favorite genres?
Oh, well, gosh, one of the books that inspired me a lot when I was writing this book was a guy by a novel called Plain Song by Kent Haruf. And he is unfortunately dead now and died some time ago, but it's a beautiful novel, a Midwestern story. And I think he has maybe 5 view characters, but it's never confusing because he labels each chapter with the character's name. And I just love that. And there's so many. I mean, I'm reading all the time. Right now, I'm reading a book called Plain, and it's a memoir of a woman I actually know here in Charlottesville who grew up in a Mennonite household. And that's just a beautiful book. And it sounds like it wouldn't be exciting, and it's not like a thriller, but it's just very interesting. And the characters, for example, I was really inspired by Daniel Woodrell's Winter's Bone, where Ree Dolly is, again, she's a very young, old person in her family because her mother has mental struggles. And that is just a beautiful book. And oh gosh, I'm a Chimamanda fan and a Toni Morrison fan, and it's just so hard to choose.
I know it's not a fair question for readers to choose.
Right. Yeah. Not a reader like me who, I don't know how many books I read a month, but I probably read a couple of books a month.
Yep. I ask it because I'm nosy, but when people ask me the question, I can't give a straightforward answer either. I have to be like, well, what genre are we talking about? What day of the week is it? What am I? What's my mood?
Right.
So, in terms of internet presence, if people want to learn more about the book and you as an author, do you have a website? What social media can they find you on, etc.?
Oh, well, I'm on all the social media. I'm at BettyJoyceNash.com, which is pretty easy. That's my website. And then Twitter is pretty easy. It's Betty Joyce N, and with a capital B, capital J, capital N. And I'm sorry, I said Twitter. I meant X. And
I think we all do it.
Instagram at BettyJoyce7396. And Facebook. Did I say that already?
Nope.
At Betty.J.Nash. But I'd love to hear from people about the book. And it's
all right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And is there anything that we have not covered while we've been talking that you want to make sure you highlight?
But let me see. I did have something I wanted to highlight. Oh, one thing I wanted to say, especially for potential writers, is that when I'm writing, and I didn't realize this until later because my first drafts were so thin. I'm just using the word thin because I thought, well, I have stuff happening on the page, but it doesn't feel rich. It doesn't feel full. And I realized that what I was talking about at some point after I started trying to linger in the scene and just open my eyes and ears and nose and just use all my senses and put myself there and not to belabor anything, not to make it longer, not to make this the prose more complicated, but to create texture. And that's the word I think I would use for the the best novels that give you that sense of feeling full and just that richness there. And just find writers that you really like, who you feel like do that. And then just look at how they do it. Just take their sentences apart and take their syntax apart and say, how are they doing it? And not confusing me. They're not using a whole string full of prepositional phrases. How are they doing it?
Yeah, makes sense. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day. It's the weekend. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for talking to me about writing.
My pleasure.
Thank you once again to BettyJoyce for joining me to talk about Everybody Here is Kin, the writing process, her inspiration, all of those things that we spoke about. I really, really appreciate it. As I said at the end, as you know, I love meeting new authors and reading books that I might not have encountered without the podcast. So if you're interested in Everybody Here is Kin, definitely check it out. Like I said, it's got some beautiful layers in terms of the relationships between the characters. As I said, really enjoyed the relationship between Lucille and Will and watching that grow. But then there's some other characters. And again, since we didn't talk about necessarily those characters in the interview, I don't want to give too much away, but there are a few other characters that I really liked. And of course, Maisie and her obsession with The Wire just made me laugh. I mean, 7-year-olds are so much fun anyway. And then when they have some kind of crazy obsession that makes you go, wait, what? How old are you? You're like a 40-year-old in a 7-year-old's body. I know that kid. So thank you so much to BettyJoyce for joining me, and to you as well for joining me. If this is something that you're interested in looking into, you definitely should pick up a copy, or maybe you're looking for that perfect book gift for someone in your life. Definitely, if they're fans of coming of age stories, or maybe this area of the world in Georgia. Obviously, Boneyard is fictional, but it is based on a real place, so maybe you want to visit that place, at least in fiction. Learn some more about the circles that they're talking about and the archaeology involved there. Definitely check this out. So thank you again to BettyJoyce. Thank you to you, my listeners, as always, for joining me. I hope that you will join me for Tuesday's episode. Tomorrow I will be speaking with author Sophia, let me double check this, Koidu Giles, and I'm probably saying the first part of that double-barreled surname incorrect. I will be checking on with her on how to properly pronounce that when I talk to her tomorrow. We'll be talking about her novella. It's called An Unexpected Ally. It is a retelling of some of the story of Circe, the goddess, one of the minor goddesses from Greek mythology. So join me for that interview. That will go up on Tuesday. And I'm looking forward to talking to Sophia. Also, to the person who commented, thank you about the audio and the video not syncing up. I'm aware of it. Thank you for pointing it out to me. It is helpful. I am aware of it. I am working to fix it. There are things that you can do to fix that in the recording, and I am working on figuring them out. The first couple of troubleshooting things I did not work. So it is, how many times am I going to say it? It's a work in progress. And thank you for being here with me on this work in progress for my second episode, my second video episode, and my 400 and something audio episode. Thank you to those who have been here from the beginning. Thank you to those of you who it's your very first episode. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast presented by the GSMC Entertainment Network. Your support means so much to me as the host and us here at the network. Greatly appreciated. Please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. That really does help. It makes a difference. And we also invite you to follow us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok. I love hearing from you. So find the podcast on social media on those platforms that I just listed, Facebook, TikTok, X, and Instagram. Let me know what you're reading. Let me know if you've read any of the authors that I've spoken to or if you're planning on it. I do love hearing from listeners. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for tuning in. I hope to have a wonderful rest of your day. And whatever you're doing this weekend, I hope that it gives you plenty of time to get yourself lost in a great book. Thank you so much.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that great. I don't wanna go to